looking forward, and then we are in a completely different situation, whether from east to west. I mean, I work with managers, let's say from Japan, from China, from Southeast Asia. It almost doesn't matter if you go from east to west, the west to east. But it's a completely different situation. Let's say if you're a regional executive or a regional manager, you can be Westerner and based in China or Japan. You cannot travel around in the region. You cannot go back and forth every quarter. It's exactly the same thing if you are a Japanese or a Chinese executive who is sent to North America or to Europe. It's much more difficult to, let's say, just visit each location that belongs to you every month, or fly back to meetings to the headquarters.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Let's say you have been coaching somebody for a while, and then says, Peter, I followed your advice, or you helped me an awful lot. It has worked so far, but it seems now I'm basically screwed. All of the things that I tried to do so far to nurture this international career, I cannot do now. I cannot maintain my network. I cannot be the person who has been on the other side, who can bring back the know-how. I cannot build my own personal brand. So what is it that people shouldn't do in this situation, according to your personal experience, and what is it that they can do to make a sideways move and still build the global value without traveling back and forth?
Yeah, sure. So this falls squarely into the kind of career coaching technical aspect of what I do for a living. And so to answer your first question, what shouldn't they do is they shouldn't have any type of a knee-jerk reaction and make any rash decisions about a career change, for example. That's number one. Number two, they shouldn't just throw together a CV and float it amongst their network and see what type of feedback they get, right? When career coaches like myself work with any individual in considering a career change, and this is no different for an expat, by the way, we will ask them to press pause, take a deep look in the mirror, and take stock of their professional narrative and their career identity. Right.
What is it that they are supposed to see in that mirror? What's let's say I am perfectly unfamiliar with all of this. What kind of a narrative am I looking for?
Yeah. So we're looking for a narrative of, there's a couple of areas of strength, but one would be something that we call dependable strengths.
Dependable strength.
Dependable strengths. Yeah. What does that sound like to you, Gabor? Dependable strength.
Elaborate. I think there are a lot of people who wouldn't know what.
Okay. Everybody knows what a strength is, right? A dependable strength is a specific type of strength, which is something that not only we're good at, which is the inherent definition of a strength, but it's also something that we do well, we enjoy, and that gives us a sense of pride or professional motivation. Right. Okay. And I'll give you an example of something that's not a dependable strength for me, but it is a strength. Spreadsheets, data analytics, I can do that stuff, right? I have to do that stuff for my business, but do I enjoy it? Do I find professional satisfaction from doing it?
In the sense that you want to depend on it for the rest of your career, or you want to rely on it?
You can rely on it for a sense of career happiness.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so that's one area, and it's called dependable strengths. And so I work with my clients to build that narrative about specifically what their dependable strengths are. And part of that is not only looking in the mirror on their own, but also getting some, I'll use the word 360 feedback because everybody would relate to that. But it's much more than just 360. And it's reaching out to your network and asking them for feedback around times when they've seen them at their best.
Okay.
Right. And identifying patterns of excellence within those stories. So the areas of strength are one part of the narrative. Some other parts of the narrative are the puzzle pieces that complete the puzzle of what I would like to call a a career motivator canvas would be personal and professional interests, right? And there's sometimes a lot of gold on the personal interest side, and reflecting that maybe there's something on the personal interest side that might bleed over into my career. Right?
I see. Is it? Do people neglect some of their interests, or do they press themselves through because they think that's where the money is or the opportunity is, and basically they have untapped potential that they haven't used for a long time?
Sometimes yes. Sometimes yes. Right.
Okay.
So interests are another area. The next area would be something that we would call satisfiers and dissatisfiers of our past jobs. Right. So yes, most people have the mental conversation like, oh, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't like him. Didn't like her. I don't like that type of personality. I don't like that type of company. They have the mental conversation with themselves, but it can get kind of convoluted and muddy up here.
Right.
All right. So we built it out into, we document it on paper, right? To build
it's like the way we learn from our parents. There are certain things we learn from our parents how to do, and there are certain things we learn from our parents because we want to do the opposite from what they did.
Yeah. That's one way of thinking about it. Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes it's like, 5 years ago I got this kind of assignment. I would like to do that again. And sometimes it's like, 3 years ago I did the job for a year. Now I never want to do that again.
Right. Exactly. I mean, we always learn as we go, right? And it's not as if we take this look in the mirror with these different elements of a career motivator canvas, and we feel like, okay, I flipped the switch, I'm done. I never, I'm glad I did that, right? And they use the past tense when actually it's a constant conversation throughout our entire career, right?
Right.
But what my clients often tell me is, like, Peter, all of these things that you asked me to do as part of our engagement, all of these exercises, right? They're like, I used to have all of these conversations in my head, so this is not rocket science to me. But what you helped me do was get it out of my head onto paper in a very organized way so that I could free up my brain to actually start making some intelligent decisions.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So that's one dynamic. And I could unpack that a bit further, but I think the other thing I'd like to bring up, and which I think might be interesting to your audience, is, once we've taken a deep look in the mirror and we've taken stock of those career motivators, right, we've pressed pause. We haven't made any rash decisions yet.
Right.
We're still not going to make any rash decisions, because what we're going to do is we're going to put together a game plan, which is based on what I will call the 3 pillars of our career. And those 3 pillars are very straightforward. One is the industry. Second is the role or the functional area. And the third is the geography.
Okay.
Now, again, this is a very basic definition, which, in conversation, one might say, oh, of course, I know that. That totally makes sense. But what many expat executives I see fail to do is make intelligent career change decisions using those 3 as a lever.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask. Are there any rules that your profession knows, like, for example, never uproot more than 2 of the 3, or
Well, I would never say never, but generally you're pulling on the right thread, Gabor. Right? So we do have this vernacular in my ecosystem called a single jump, double jump, and triple jump.
Right.
Okay. And so obviously a single jump is when you change any one of those 3 pillars. A double jump is changing 2 of the 3. Triple jump is changing all 3. So the important dynamics to understand, and I would encourage all of your listeners to think about this, whether you're an expat or not, but it's specifically important when you're an expat, is to acknowledge, well, first of all, you need to have a game plan around these 3 pillars. And so when I work with clients, I have them put together a plan A and a plan B, at least. And sometimes there's a plan C. But understanding that if you're trying to pull off, let's say you're doing a zero jump, right? You're staying in the same industry, just a different company, same functional area, same geography, probably the same city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's probably okay that you just submit your resume for an open application, and it's highly likely that the hiring manager will look at your profile and say, "Hey, let's call this guy in or this gal in for an interview." Okay, but that's a zero jump.
Right.
The moment you
Is it
start
a jump?
changing, no, it's zero. It's we'll call it a zero jump. It's not a jump. It's not a jump at all, right? But the moment you start easing into possibly a single jump, maybe you're staying in the same city, but you want to try changing functional area or try changing industry. Well, then that immediately becomes a little bit more difficult just to submit a blind application, right?
Right.
And then if you're going for a double or a triple jump, then one is the degree of difficulty goes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
The increasing need for strategy, a strategic approach goes up, as well as the realization that to pursue a new opportunity in a double or triple jump scenario is going to require a more non-traditional approach.
Right. Right. I was in touch with somebody just this morning who said, here is my CV. As you can see, I have been in the sales sector for most of my career, but basically now I don't want to be in sales anymore. So the difficulty of that is that, let's say you want to be in consulting or you want to be in something completely different in HR, then the question is, why would they hire you? I mean, your track record is sales. Probably there is a good answer to this question from somebody like you.
Well, yes, you can build up the reason. If it's a switch from sales to HR, I would first we want to identify which part of HR. That's number one, because
Right.
HR has many subsegments within it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But number two is the idea of identifying transferable skills and being able to sell those transferable skills into an HR role, right? That being said, your chances of success of pulling off that functional shift go way up when you use a non-traditional approach to that new opportunity. And when I say non-traditional, I mean a traditional approach is submit your resume, have a conversation afterwards, right? The non-traditional approach is you flip the script and you have conversations first through your relationships and your networking efforts and your web of trusting relationships.
Right.
To the point where people say, oh, I see what you're trying to accomplish. Actually, you'd be a pretty good fit because you do have transferable skills. Hey, why don't you send me your CV?
That's right. But if we look at it on a global scale or an international scale, that has become more difficult because mobility has gone down. So people, I don't know. Actually, let's think out loud. Has it become more difficult because people don't travel that much internationally, or has it become easier because everybody has gone online? So let's say I am in a certain location and I'm hoping to go to another geographical area. Is it easier to get to the decision makers now because everybody is scooped up at home and they are working online, or is it harder because I cannot just board a train and or plane and pretend that I'm on holidays there, but actually I'm not working?
Yeah. Oddly, I would say it's become easier because of the fact that we have all had to become so comfortable with Zoom and Google Meet and other technologies, right?
Right. So the third pillar has become slightly easier to spin around because you can just get online and get in touch with people that 10 years ago would have been very difficult to hunt down online, or even 5.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would tend to agree with that statement. Now, from the individual perspective, let's say from I'll call them a job seeker for lack of a better term. From the job seeker perspective, if you're thinking about a career change to another geography, the first piece of advice I would always give, right? And there are always exceptions, right? But If you want to increase your chances of success and you're looking at a new geography, maybe you're looking at a switch from Asia to South America. First thing I would say is don't even think about changing industry and function.
Right.
Just stick with your same industry and your same function and leverage that to get
in the third one.
Exactly. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule. And I have a couple of cases I can share if you're interested.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So one of my favorite stories is about an MBA student whom I advised when I was at Holt International Business School in London, or excuse me, in Shanghai. So he had a very interesting profile. He grew up in an expatriate family, originally from India, but he grew up and received his education in Thailand. Okay, and that had to do with his father's career path, right? But when he came to Hull to do his MBA, he was an oil and gas engineer in India.
Right.
Okay. So industry, oil and gas, functional area, engineering, and specifically it was engineering of like pipelines, right? And then in the geography was India, right? So he came to do his MBA in Shanghai. I'm his career advisor, his career coach. And of course, my first question is, what are your early ideas about what you want to do after you finish your MBA? And he immediately hit me with a triple jump.
Wow.
And without, of course, he didn't have this terminology in his mind when he said it, and probably didn't even think about the dynamics of how challenging it would be. But he said, I want to be a management consultant in one of the big four in London. Right. And so we now all know on this webinar tonight that that's a triple jump, and not only a triple jump, but a massively challenging one. Right. And long story short, and I'm happy to answer questions about why he was successful, but he was successful.
Wow.
And he landed with a big four in London as a management consultant, and he's since been promoted to managing teams of consultants.
So you coach people through this entire process of figuring out how they want to go about it, and then looking for opportunities and so on.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Is there another story, or shall we move on?
Well, why don't we move on? I mean, unless anybody has any questions about it.
What